stories in pop culture. This week, that means we're talking about Anne Hathaway. It means we're talking about the new Dua Lipa record. The group chat is here. They got a lot to say, so let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. You know what I love about today? It's the day where we spend the time with all the biggest stories in pop culture, and I'm truly so excited to talk about this new Anne Hathaway movie because spoiler alert, I loved it. But we're not there yet because if you would indulge me, we are going to start here. That's a jam. That is End of an Era from Dua Lipa's new album. It's called Radical Optimism. That album dropped today. I'm really fascinated by Dua Lipa. I think she's an unusual case of a pop star at the moment, so I want to get into it. Suzy Exposito is here. Kathleen Newman-Bremang's here. And for the first time, Jen Wilson is here. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. How's everyone feeling? Hello.
Hi, Elamin.
Hi.
Doing good.
Hi.
I'm excited to do this. Listen, maybe Suzy, I'll start with you. You've given the new album from Dua Lipa a listen. What's your take on this record?
This is an interesting moment for her.
Yeah.
I think that she, is starting to try to break away from her signature new disco sound. But the song with Barbie, that was a smash.
Yeah.
I think it's a sound that, she wears very well, but it's also dovetailing with this Y2K revival that we've been having for the last few years. Her previous album, Future Nostalgia, really opened up the floodgates. And, in the past year, we've had a lot of new disco moments. Kylie Minogue came back swinging with Padam Padam.
Yes.
Sophie Ellis-Bextor got her due after being featured in Saltburn with Murder on the Dance Floor, finally charted here in the States. And so I think that this is a great time for Dua Lipa's carefree disco, but she's trying to break away from that a little bit. In Radical Optimism, she used live instrumentals. We're getting a more eclectic vibe from her, but I still feel like we're at the disco and it's getting late.
Those two reference points are interesting to me, the Sophie Ellis-Bextor and Kylie Minogue, because they are also very dated references. They are not of the current sort of pop moment. I don't want to talk about that for a moment, but actually let's just hear some of Dua Lipa experimenting with some of this live instrumentation on this record.
Yeah, I gotta hit the road.
Okay, so that song is called French Exit. It's off this new record. Kathleen, you know what interests me about Dua Lipa is that, there is a mismatch between how famous Dua Lipa is and the kind of music that she makes. Dua Lipa's new album is an event, and I'm surprised by the way that it's an event because to me it's a larger event than other people in the same class of fame, let's say. She's the kind of person who, I'm just trying this thesis out on you. Maybe you can go, Elamin, you're totally, completely wrong. But of course she's no Taylor, she's no Beyonce, but she's sort of in the same conversation to me as an Ariana Grande, for example, at least in the same kind of fame stratosphere. But I'm used to those stars revealing something about themselves. I have listened to this album twice this morning. I don't think I learned anything new about Dua Lipa. And I think that's what's surprising to me is that, and I'm someone who likes her music, but she's not someone who treads a lot on self-revelation. Does that surprise you at all that she's as famous as she is, given that she doesn't tell us a lot about who Dua Lipa is?
Yeah, I do think that surprises me. It's interesting. I don't completely disagree with you. I would disagree maybe that this is an event. I
think it's an event, but okay. Yes.
Listened to this album this morning because I was contractually obligated to by the CBC for this podcast. So I wouldn't say an event in the same way. But it is interesting when you talk about the current pop landscape, and Suzy mentioned some of the ways that Dua Lipa is trying to stand out, and this disco revival. But where I stack her against the current pop girls that I listen to, like an Ariana Grande, Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, Renee Rapp, SZA, Doja Cat. It's interesting because she does feel like an outlier, but I don't know in a good way. I know her music. I know she's a Grammy Award winner. I know her resume. I know that she maybe dated Trevor Noah, that she's dating Callum Turner.
Sure.
I know her stance on some social and political issues.
Yeah.
But again, that's not really coming through in the music, which I guess you wouldn't expect from this kind of music. But yeah, I don't seek her out in my spare time. And she is obviously very successful, but it's interesting. And the music is not bad. Like, it's good. I had a nice time. But it's interesting that I don't think her success aligns with like a cultural impact or a cultural moment. And a lot of the big figures in pop music right now elicit such strong reactions, right? Like Drake, Taylor, Beyonce. You either love them or you hate them. And I think because Dua Lipa's music isn't super personal in an obvious way, like Taylor, which I think unfairly, actually, we've come to expect now from artists, even like a Miley Cyrus, who I would also consider a contemporary, a peer to Dua. Wrecking Ball, Flowers, her two biggest songs. Those were both very personal songs that also added to the lore and the gossip of Miley Cyrus. So it's interesting that, and it's also the album I don't think is conceptually that new from what we've heard from her. So, unlike a Beyonce, which, she's not in the same category, but you're not getting something like super conceptually new. So Dua Lipa is just kind of there and reliable and there. And I think that's okay.
Reliable is a good word.
That's how I felt listening to it.
Reliable is a good word for this, because like Jen, when I think about Dua Lipa, I think very competent. I think very capable of delivering decent vocals on a song. But the difference between Dua and everyone else that Kathleen just laid out on that list is that there is a meta-narrative attached to those other stars. There's a meta-narrative, certainly a meta-narrative about Taylor, but like, can we talk a little bit about the meta-narrative of Ariana Grande? Like, that's someone who did not used to have a meta-narrative. She used to be like, oh, that's like the lady who sounds a little like Mariah. And then, you get Thank You Next, and she sort of forces us to create a conversation about her because she's engaging with her own sort of out there personality. With Dua Lipa, like, to me, the way that she got catapulted to stardom was Future Nostalgia dropped. It dropped in March of 2020, and it dropped in a moment where we're like, oh, this is the lady that makes me want to go to the club in a moment when I can't go to the club. And that is an idea, but I'm not sure that idea is sustainable. And so this album comes out, and I'm like, shouldn't there be a narrative to hook on this album onto? But there doesn't seem to be one. Is it unfair to expect a meta-narrative of a superstar, do you think, Jen?
I mean, it's funny. I think, Kathleen, you just sort of said something like, you don't seek her out. You don't seek out Dua Lipa. And it's funny you say that because to me, Dua Lipa, I feel the same way. Dua Lipa is someone I hear in the Uber. Like, she comes to me.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I don't necessarily seek
you don't
her
go towards,
out, you know. Suzy's profile was so interesting because I had been sort of feeling the same. I'd been feeling like this is a lot of dance music. I'm not getting a lot of interiority. Maybe I don't need to. And I was sort of interrogating my own expectation of that.
Sure.
But I thought that, this idea that, she comes out of this, Eastern Europe context where clubbing is really just part of daily life for people of all ages in a way that maybe it isn't here in the US. I used to live in Russia for a time. It's the only time in my life where I regularly went to dance clubs because it just was so much more kind of like humane. It was more, it was not too expensive. You didn't have to pay $500 to sit down.
Yeah. Sure.
So it made me wonder if like part of like the, her love of dancing, of going out, of feeling like this, this kind of socializing should be for everyone. If that isn't her telling us something about her background, her cultural background.
Yeah, I was going to say, Suzy, this is what I was going to bring you next because Jen just referenced a profile that you just did of Dua Lipa. And like, it seems like your argument is kind of like she is actually revealing some of herself on this record. She is revealing who Dua Lipa is just like not the same level of interiority that you maybe have come to demand of other pop stars. Is that an accurate take of your experience of Dua?
Yeah, in my profile for Elle, I really dig into the fact that she is the eldest daughter of immigrants, and her parents are from Kosovo,
Yeah.
and her parents fled war. They went to England because it was literally breaking out into war, and it was something that I think framed her ethos as an artist. It's definitely shaped her narrative, being the child of refugees. So she does appreciate the club a lot more. She went to the box with Charlie XCX and ran into her parents in New York. Like, that's how much of a clubbing family this is. And so
that's
for
a
her,
nightmare.
I mean,
You just described my nightmare, but anyway, continue.
but something that's so, I don't know, like we think of it as like, oh my God, I would hate for that. But her being a child of refugees, she really appreciates that, and they really appreciate that, like, joie de vivre attitude, which I think for us, we're like, no, give us gossip, give us juice, and she's like, I'm free. she worked with, and again, that's the eldest immigrant daughter coming out,
Yeah, I was like, I don't need to give you that.
I'm free.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. I'm the only one who tells me what to do. I raised you all. Anyway, but yeah, I think this was her attempt at, like, liberating herself a little bit from this silo that she kind of placed herself in as like a disco revivalist. Yeah. She brought in Kevin Parker from Tame Impala into her world. Yes. I can't say that he brought much Tame Impala into it. No. It was more like, he was a guest at her table, and the table was serving disco. And I'm sorry, you just... the rhythm is going to get you. She's
good at that. She's really good at, I mean, like, the BPM does not drop on this album. Like, there's no moments where it's like, hey, here's what a quieter Dua Lipa song sounds like. And I should say that, like, she talked to my pal Tom Power on Q. One of the moments that stood out in that interview is that she said, people always kind of demand that, like, in order for you to feel something, it's got to be the slower songs, but that's not necessarily the case. I guess, like, I don't begrudge her any of that. I don't mean to sound prescriptive, Kathleen, in any of this. I don't want to go, in order for her to be a pop star, she has to do this. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a mismatch, I think, between, at least I perceive a mismatch, between the amount of Dua that I'm getting in the music and the superstardom. And I'm starting to figure out what accounts for that. So if you have any answers as to what might account, because I would think she might be as famous as, like, Zara Larsson. And if you're walking down the street and you go, Zara Larsson and Dua Lipa should be in the same category, and someone goes, who's Zara Larsson? I would say exactly my point.
Correct.
But not the case with Dua Lipa. I do think she's kind of transcended to a different level of fame.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because everything Suzy just said and reading the profile made me more interested in her than anything that's coming through in the music. And I'm not saying that she needs to, go into being an eldest daughter of immigrants and a child of refugees in this pop music. Like, maybe it is just about freedom and happiness and joy, which we need, which is okay. But the fact that there just isn't the same interest, I hear you. I think she's famous because she's beautiful and because she's got, like, a kind of cool personality. And when you do read a profile of her, you're interested in her backstory. Yeah. She does have this kind of, like, not kind of, she's European, this separation from a lot of the pop girls that we're seeing right now.
I think that's true.
Because of her background. And so I think maybe that's added to the fame of it. But I agree, the music is not really matching. I also... as much as people know her name, again, it's like, do people care that much about Dua Lipa, though? Does the fame match up with, like, an interest or a care or a stand-up? I don't know. There must be.
I don't know who the Dua Lipa stands are. I haven't met them personally, but I will say, I'll tell you this, though. Like, my experience of Dua Lipa in general is, like, I read her newsletter. I'm a subscriber to her newsletter. I think she has interesting views on the world, Kathleen, and I'm not sure this is the reason for laughter. She has a clear set of politics that she sometimes expresses. It just doesn't work its way into the music. And you know what? If she's found a work-life balance in doing so, she's like, I make the hits, I go home, I do my politics, please stay out of my business. Who am I to begrudge her this way of life? I should also tell people, go listen to the Q interview with Tom Power, because I think it's really interesting. In the meantime, I got to keep things moving. I got to move on to this.
I feel like I don't meet people like you very often. And most people think they already know me. Hayes Campbell. It's not me. I don't know. You didn't seem to care. I think you're smart, and you know, you're also you're hot or whatever. Hot. Or whatever.
I just think you're hot or whatever. That is from The Idea of You. That is a new movie starring Anne Hathaway. She plays a 40-year-old divorced mom who she goes to Coachella, and then she somehow ends up with a relationship with a 24-year-old member of a boy band played by Nicholas Galitzine. Kathleen, there's been a lot of talk about Nicholas, about his character, Hayes. He's the member of this boy band, August Moon. It's, shall we say, Harry Styles coded? You talked to Robin Lee, who's the author of the book that this movie is based on. What'd she tell you about Harry? Did she say anything about Harry? Did she say anything at all? Reveal to us.
Well, you know, she basically said she's sick of people thinking that Hayes Campbell is solely based on Harry Styles.
Get out of here,
but he's
Robin.
Definitely
okay. All right.
Yeah, he's
I've seen the
definitely
movie.
Harry Styles coded. Come on.
Yeah.
But she does say that she said that she based this character on a lot of different men, like Mark Wahlberg from his Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch days. One of the members of New Kids on the Block. She did not specify which one. She grew up obsessed with Duran Duran. Prince Harry, like there's a lot of different inspirations. And I think that might be disappointing to some people because this was kind of billed as Harry Styles fan fiction. The book like blew up in 2020, 2021 when he was known to be dating older women. And then of course he dated Olivia Wilde, who is an older woman and a mom like Celine, Anne Hathaway's character.
Yeah.
So it's an easy hook, but I, especially after watching the movie, which I also loved.
Yeah.
I love that Hayes Campbell isn't just one boy band frontman. Nicholas Galitzine, he embodies this boy band lead singer energy so well. He also said that BTS was one of his inspirations. He's so good, like so good it's going to be a problem for me, but he's so good that you can, truly, you can project your fantasies onto this character, no matter who your favorite boy band member was growing up. And I know we're going to talk about, you know, the romance of this movie, but as a commentary on female desire and on lust and sex after a certain age, to use the lead singer of a boy band in this story to do that, I think is brilliant because for so many of us, our sexual awakenings came from crushing on our first boy band members. And when you keep that in mind, that we come of age with these crushes, but hold on to them for the rest of our lives, and then have that figure opposite a woman turning 40. And the world sees her as sexless, completely devoid of that desire that she started developing as a teen, and say, no, hey, not only does that drive not go away, but that the lead singer is into this woman and that she's hot and even more desirable as a grown woman than she was as a teen girl. Her life isn't over. I love it as a premise, and I think they pulled it off. I'm obsessed. 10 out of 10.
Jen,
no notes.
Jen, so much of the juice of this movie is in that very premise that you sort of, it's like, it's front loaded. At the very start of this movie, the energy and the electricity is derived from you just like putting yourself in that position, putting yourself in the position of like being the recipient of all the attention of the hottest member of the boy band that you love. Did that energy work for you? Did that dynamic sort of immediately kind of pop off the screen for you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
When I started thinking about it, when I put my critic hat on really tightly, I started to sort of find problems in it. So I just sort of threw my hat sort of out the window so that I could keep feeling that kind of, you know, that energy.
Yeah.
I also really loved how every character has like their favorite member of the boy band.
Yes.
And they're really strict about it. They're like, no, Rory, only Rory. And, you know, it kind of occurred to me, this is sort of like this way that you develop kind of discernment, like sort of having to choose between 5 boys. It's sort of different from just kind of an individual kind of, you know, pop star who you like. Like you really sort of learn something about your own desire and sort of, you know, like what turns you on, what turns you off. Like it's actually, I really enjoyed this film. Suzy had mentioned the kind of sort of like Y2K revival. This took me back to 2000s era. You know, I was telling your producer, for me, No Strings Attached, that was like the moon landing. Like I was just so, that was kind of like a historical event for me. So yeah, it just brought back just sort of wonderful memories. It was, yes, a celebration of, you know, female desire at, you know, at 40 and plus. But I also thought, you know,
boy bands are about female desire at all ages. And I really thought the movie found a way to celebrate that as well, in addition to its main storyline.
I'm going to think about the phrase "no strings attached" was like the moon landing for me for like the rest of the day. But also like truly no one can pull a scene together with a single tear like Anne Hathaway. Like it's unbelievable. Suzy, let's just talk a little bit about this movie as a romantic movie. Did it land for you appropriately?
You know, as someone who is a professional music journalist, I'm just really, really glad that Anne Hathaway didn't play a music journalist, because I do believe people think that this is my life. I go to Coachella and I don't know if I'm going to meet a teen heartthrob. And that's clearly why I do what I do.
Why else would you do what you do? Yes, 100%.
Yeah, what am I doing there? But no, as a romantic movie, I think it is really sweet. I do love how it does dig into like desirability for women of a certain age, and especially after having a kid. I think that the romance, you know, what's so funny is that the things that are romantic in this movie, like, you know, Anne Hathaway catching a flight last minute to New York and then deciding to be a vacanza queen in Italy, you know, and they go to Paris and they go to the south of France. For me, knowing musicians in real life, that's a headache. That's a headache and a half.
Sounds like a bad time. Yeah.
It sounds like a terrible time. Hanging out with teenagers in the south of France? No,
he's 24, for the record.
It's the groupies that I'm talking about. Who knows? They're like these pool nymphs, and they're really shady to Anne Hathaway. Pool nymphs.
That's accurate. Yeah.
You know, and like that stuff. Oh yeah, you feel that when you're hanging out with the band, interviewing the band, you're backstage, and there's all these backstage nymphs. You know, the scenery changes.
Of course.
They say nymphs.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think the romance of it, you just got to feel the fantasy. You just got to lead into the fantasy. You don't think about the age gap. People are talking about the age gap.
No,
I don't care.
not me.
It's a fantasy.
Well, I was saying, like, Kathleen, I had two thoughts with this movie. One was an extremely Kathleen thought, and then the second one was a thing I'm going to put to you. So the first thought that I had was watching this movie and thinking about this movie, thinking of the idea of you, and then also thinking of Challengers. I was like, hey, kissing is back. We had a moment where
horny movies are back, baby.
It's been a minute, but like this is sort of peak of that discourse, and to get those two movies back to back is quite something. But then two, I had this frustration with the movie. I really love this movie, but I had a frustration with it, which is that when these movies work, it's because you get swept into the fantasy, and this movie just wouldn't let itself enjoy the fantasy long enough. Like, it kind of felt it kept trying to be like, and to be a serious movie from time to time, we have to also like pull back and show how the real world kind of comes rushing into this like construct of this person falling in love with a boy band member. It just did that so frequently that I was like, let her enjoy this. Let her just kind of get swept away with it. Did you have the same frustration, or were you like, no, it was actually a fine balance?
Yeah, no, I didn't have that frustration because I think the stakes are high, and I think that makes for a good romance, right? Like, the reality is that it would be very annoying to go hang out with pool nymphs as a 40-year-old, right? Like, it would be impact her 16-year-old daughter, or however old her daughter is in the movie. Like, it would be a big thing of contention. And I think the romance is that they like each other so much. They're so into each other in spite of all that. And I think the movie did strike a good balance. And then I also think that aside from all those annoying, like, yes, we just want to watch Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine make out the whole movie and just be happy.
And they really do for much of the movie. Yes,
they sure do. Thankfully, their chemistry. And I think that's the thing that we also have been missing, which is what Challengers had. And what the idea of you has is that chemistry between these two leads that we don't see often. And these two have that. So any other like kind of annoyances or like, oh, I want them to just be together, I think it was all made up for because of their chemistry.
The chemistry that you see is there from like second 1, minute 1, and it's just a delight to watch. Kathleen, Jen, Suzy, I got to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time. You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Of course. Suzy Exposito is a music journalist in Los Angeles. Kathleen Newman-Bremang, Deputy Director of Refinery 29 Unbothered. She was in Toronto. Jennifer Wilson is a contributing writer for The New Yorker. She was in Brooklyn. Me, I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll see you next week.